Welcome to the truth that most people never tell you, the power of silence. You see, every time you speak about your dreams, your plans, your progress, your brain releases dopamine. It tricks you. It makes you feel like you've already accomplished something, but you haven't. You just talked about it. That instant pleasure is deceptive. It's like a sugar rush for the mind. And just like sugar, it crashes fast. And when it does, your discipline weakens. Your motivation fades. Your focus scatters. Why? Because the brain has already gotten its reward, not from doing the work, but from talking about it. The science is clear. When you vocalize your goals too early, you rob your mind of the hunger it needs to chase them. You trade real momentum for shallow praise. External validation becomes your drug. You start relying on other people's reactions to feel good about your path. And that's dangerous. Not everyone who listens to your story supports it. Some secretly want you to fail. Some manipulate your progress, and some simply don't understand your vision, and that misunderstanding can plant doubt where confidence should grow. Your journey is sacred. Not secret, but sacred. It deserves protection. You want to become stronger? Learn to be silent while you build. Learn to channel your energy inward toward work, discipline, and consistency, not outward into words and attention. Don't seek applause before the performance. Let your results do the speaking. Let your habits build the story. Let your silence feed your fire. Because when your life becomes your message, you no longer need to explain it. Hold your vision close. Guard it. Nurture it. Speak less. Do more. And remember, the most powerful growth always happens in silence. Oversharing activates your reward circuitry prematurely, reducing long-term drive and discipline. This might seem like a subtle behavioral flaw, but on a deeper level, it's a powerful self-sabotaging mechanism wired into the very structure of your brain. When you talk excessively about your goals, plans, or personal experiences, especially before those goals have been fully developed or achieved, you're not just informing others, you're triggering a neurochemical reaction. This reaction, primarily involving dopamine, gives your brain a false sense of accomplishment. In simpler terms, you're hacking your brain into thinking you've already done the hard work when all you've done is verbalize it. Dopamine is often misunderstood. Most people think of it as the pleasure chemical, but that's only part of the story. It's actually the motivation neurotransmitter. It helps you feel the anticipation of a reward and pushes you to act toward a goal. It's what energizes you, drives you forward, and gives you the ability to focus. However, when you talk too much about what you're planning to do, whether it's starting a new business, transforming your health, or rebuilding your mindset, your brain doesn't always wait for the action to release dopamine. The praise you receive from people, the likes, comments, or nods of approval can produce that same dopamine hit. And once that's released, your brain feels partially satisfied. It believes you've already taken a step toward your goal, even if in reality, you haven't moved an inch. This is the trap. You get high on the idea of doing something, but not the act of doing it. The more you indulge in this cycle, the less you train your brain to crave effort and execution. Talking becomes your new action. Daydreaming becomes your new discipline. You might feel productive, but all you're really doing is trading in real results for emotional quick fixes. This is why many people start with energy but never finish. They talk too much, got too comfortable, and unknowingly remove the internal pressure that real progress demands. Your brain is always adapting. If you reward it for words instead of actions, it'll learn to chase validation instead of victory. It will begin to associate social responses with success rather than the actual outcome you're after. This not only weakens your ability to follow through, but it also makes you emotionally dependent on external feedback. You start caring more about how people see your goals than whether you're actually working on them. The consequences go even further. Constantly expressing your intentions creates an illusion of momentum. You begin to mistake attention for achievement. Someone hears your plans and says, "Wow, that's amazing." And suddenly you feel like you've already climbed half the mountain, but you haven't even laced up your boots. That illusion is comforting, but it's also deadly to discipline. Discipline, unlike motivation, is not a fleeting emotion. It's a practice behavior. It's built in the quiet, behind the scenes, far away from praise or approval. When you share too much, you rob yourself of the emotional hunger needed to maintain discipline. The hunger fades because you've already tasted the reward. It's like telling your body you've eaten just because you smelled food. It feels good for a moment, but the nutrition never arrives. And then comes the crash. Because the applause stops, the attention fades. The world moves on. And now you're left alone with a dream you never acted on and a brain that no longer has the fire to pursue it. You begin to feel confused. You wonder why you're stuck. You might even blame your circumstances, your environment, or your lack of resources. But deep down, the truth is simpler. You spent too much time talking and not enough time doing. To reverse this, you must start with restraint. Not silence, but restraint. Know the value of privacy, not as secrecy, but as a strategy. When you keep your goals to yourself, you keep the dopamine locked behind the gate of achievement. You condition your brain to crave the real work. You create a neurological environment where the only reward is earned, not imagined. This shift rewires your focus. It strengthens your inner drive because your brain now associates satisfaction with action, not attention. The less you talk about your journey, the more energy you preserve to walk it. You don't need to announce every step. The path rewards the persistent, not the loud. There is a quiet confidence that comes from building in silence. It's not about hiding from the world. It's about anchoring yourself to a deeper sense of purpose. When you stop oversharing, you become more introspective. You start to notice your own patterns, your real fears, your true motivations. You begin to ask better questions and make better decisions. Your focus sharpens, your discipline deepens. And eventually, something beautiful happens. You begin to trust yourself more. You stop looking outward for confirmation and start finding strength within. You develop a momentum that doesn't need fuel from others. You become the source of your own fire. So stop telling everyone what's happening in your life. Not because they don't care. Not because they'll steal your ideas. But because you need that energy for yourself. You need your brain to stay hungry. You need your mind to remain grounded in work, not in talk. Protect your path. Protect your progress. Learn to celebrate in silence until the results are undeniable. Because in the end, it's not the people who speak the most who change their lives. It's the ones who stay quiet and show up every single day. Your brain treats talking about goals like achieving them, leading to decreased motivation. This phenomenon, while subtle, is deeply rooted in how the human brain processes reward and motivation. It's a trick of the mind, a psychological illusion that gives you a false sense of progress, and it can be one of the biggest hidden obstacles on the path to success. The human brain is designed to reward you for progress. That reward comes primarily through the release of dopamine, a chemical that plays a key role in motivation, attention, and reinforcement of behavior. Dopamine is meant to push you forward, to keep you striving, working, and achieving. But the brain doesn't always differentiate between real progress and imagined progress. When you talk about your goals, when you announce to others what you plan to do, how big your dream is, or how far you've come, your brain can interpret that as if you've actually accomplished something. This is where the trap begins. Let's say you tell your friends, I'm going to start waking up at 5 a.m. and work on my business every day. That statement alone can feel powerful. You might even receive praise or encouragement in return. That praise activates your brain's reward system. Suddenly, you feel accomplished. You feel a rush of pride, a sense of direction, and even a bit of fulfillment. But here's the problems. You haven't actually done anything yet. You've simply spoken words. No alarm clock has been set. No early morning grind has happened. No business plan has been executed. Yet, your brain already gave you the dopamine. It already celebrated. The work never got a chance to earn the reward. Over time, if this becomes a habit, your brain gets conditioned to expect rewards for talking rather than doing. You speak your goals, get the emotional high, and then wonder why your motivation slowly dies out. The desire fades, the urgency disappears, and what once felt like an exciting journey begins to feel heavy and hollow. This is especially common in a culture that rewards visibility over effort. Social media, for example, encourages people to share their intentions constantly. I'm going to the gym. I'm launching a brand. I'm working on a big idea. These announcements feel good. They attract attention, but they can also become addictive. You might find yourself sharing more than building, talking more than doing, celebrating the beginning instead of fighting through the middle. The result is predictable, a long trail of unfinished projects, lost energy, and broken confidence. You start to question your ability to follow through. You start wondering if you're capable of achieving what you set out to do. But the issue wasn't your capability. It was how you managed your internal rewards. You let the dopamine arrive too early. This doesn't mean you should never talk about your goals. There's a difference between planning with intention and seeking attention. When you discuss your goals in private with a mentor or a coach, the purpose is strategy and accountability. When you announce your goals to the world for validation or praise, the purpose shifts, and so does the impact. If you want to stay motivated, you have to train your brain to crave progress, not applause. That means resisting the urge to speak before you've acted. It means learning to love the quiet grind that no one sees. When your motivation comes from movement When your energy is tied to the steps you're actually taking, then your dopamine release becomes aligned with effort, not ego. That's when you build discipline. That's when you create momentum. Another problem with premature reward is that it leads to complacency. The illusion of progress can make you let your guard down, you slow down, you procrastinate, you give yourself extra time. After all, you feel like you've already done something. But in reality, the gap between where you are and where you want to be remains untouched. It's still wide. And if you're not careful, that gap can grow larger as your motivation fades. You can't build a legacy on intentions. You can't build confidence on words. You need action. You need repetition. You need quiet progress. Let your brain learn to wait. Teach it that dopamine only comes after real effort. Train yourself to delay the celebration. The more you do this, the more powerful your motivation becomes. You won't need constant reminders or external validation. Your drive will be internal. Your fuel will be built from discipline, not dopamine tricks. This shift can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to talking about your goals. You might feel invisible. You might miss the applause. But what you gain in exchange is far more valuable. You gain focus. You gain clarity. You gain consistency. These are the real tools of achievement. These are the habits that create long-term results. You don't need to tell the world what you're doing. You just need to do it. Let your work speak. Let your progress be the proof. Let your transformation be loud while your process stays quiet. Because the truth is simple. If you let your words replace your actions, you will always struggle with motivation. But if you protect your goals, if you work in silence, and if you save the dopamine for real victories, you will build a mind that doesn't just talk about success, it lives it. External validation creates dependency, weakening internal self-control and resilience. At first glance, external validation can feel harmless, even helpful. It's natural to want recognition. We all want to be seen, heard, appreciated. A kind word, a compliment, or a cheer from someone you respect can give you a momentary sense of pride and encouragement. But the issue arises when that validation becomes your emotional fuel, when it becomes your primary source of motivation rather than a byproduct of your work. The brain, in its search for reward and comfort, quickly latches onto whatever delivers a dopamine release. And in today's world, external validation is everywhere and always available. You post your plans online, you mention your goals in conversation, and immediately you get support, reactions, approval. Your brain likes this. It starts to expect it. Then it begins to need it. This creates a hidden dependency. Without realizing it, your brain becomes conditioned to wait for outside approval before it commits to action. You hesitate to move forward unless someone else notices. You begin to share your ideas prematurely just to see how people respond. And if they respond with praise, you feel good, even if you haven't done anything yet. But if they respond with indifference or skepticism, you start to doubt yourself. Suddenly, your self-worth is no longer rooted in the work you do in silence. It becomes tied to the reactions of people who aren't even walking your path. And when that happens, your inner compass weakens. You stop trusting your instincts. You stop taking risks. You hesitate to act boldly unless someone is clapping. Over time, this reliance on external approval chips away at two of the most critical traits needed for long-term success: self-control and resilience. Self-control is the ability to do what needs to be done, especially when no one is watching. It's the mental discipline to stay focused, make sacrifices, and stay on track even when the results are delayed. But if you're constantly chasing validation, you begin to make decisions based on how they will be perceived, not based on what is truly right for your journey. You might delay important steps because you're afraid of how they'll look. You might overexpose your process because you're addicted to being seen. And eventually, you begin to build a life that's more about performance than purpose. You're no longer doing things for their intrinsic value. You're doing them for applause. That kills real self-control. Resilience, too, begins to fade. Resilience is your ability to endure setbacks, rejections, and long seasons of silence. It's your ability to keep going when the rewards are delayed and no one is cheering you on. But when you're used to external validation, silence feels like failure. You begin to question everything when people stop noticing. You lose momentum when the crowd disappears. And instead of pushing through challenges, you start giving up too early. You become emotionally fragile, unable to withstand the discomfort that growth requires. True resilience comes from an internal belief system. It comes from a deep, unshakable understanding that your work matters even when no one sees it. It grows in the dark, in solitude, where you learn to validate yourself through action, not attention. To regain this strength, you must first recognize the trap. You must understand that external validation is not inherently bad. It becomes dangerous when it's your main source of motivation. The shift begins when you choose to act even when no one knows, when you choose to show up without sharing, when you choose to build in silence. This doesn't mean you isolate yourself completely. It means you begin to build an internal system of reward. You start acknowledging your small wins privately. You track your progress for yourself, not for likes or applause. You start asking better questions. Did I show up today? Did I honor my habits? Did I move one step forward? These questions anchor you. They center you in the process, not the performance. As this shift takes root, you'll notice something powerful happening. Your confidence begins to rise, not because others see your progress, but because you do. You begin to develop a quiet pride, a self-respect that no one can take from you. You start to act without needing permission. You start to endure without needing pity. You begin to lead yourself, even when no one is watching. That is the essence of true strength, and slowly, external validation loses its grip. You'll still appreciate it, but you won't depend on it. You'll still be grateful for support, but it won't define you. You'll begin to prefer the peace of privacy over the noise of attention. You'll begin to crave the satisfaction of effort over the thrill of exposure. And when you achieve something great, it won't be because people cheered. It will be because you earned it in silence, with discipline and integrity. This is not about being cold or distant. It's about being rooted, grounded, whole. A person who knows their worth and doesn't need to constantly announce it. A person who validates themselves through commitment, not conversation. So if you've found yourself chasing approval, step back. Ask yourself, who am I doing this for? What do I want to prove? And to whom? Then remind yourself that you are the only one who walks this path, and that the deepest rewards will never come from others. They will come from within, from the quiet moments, the lonely decisions, the unseen work. That's where greatness is born. And that's where it lives. Privacy preserves psychological safety, which is essential for deep focus and creativity. In a world that constantly pressures us to share, document, and expose every detail of our lives, privacy has become not only rare but also misunderstood. It's often mistaken for secrecy, shyness, or avoidance. But in reality, privacy is power. It is the mental and emotional space where clarity is formed, where resilience is built, and where the deepest work happens. Psychological safety doesn't only apply to how others treat you, it's also about how you treat your inner world. When your thoughts, goals, emotions, and struggles are constantly on display, you rob yourself of the safety that's required to evolve without pressure. Creativity and focus are not born in chaos. They don't thrive in environments filled with noise, judgment, or constant evaluation. These states of mind need safety. They need stillness. They need room to explore, to fail to question, and to dream without interference. When you expose your process too soon, when you share your ideas before they're ready, or when you open your emotional wounds to public opinion, you invite instability into your mind. You invite feedback before understanding. You allow the outside world to shape the narrative of something that is still fragile inside you. Privacy is not about hiding, it's about protecting. You protect your thoughts while they are forming. You protect your ideas while they are incubating. You protect your emotions while they are healing. When you keep certain parts of your life to yourself, it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength and maturity. Because not everything needs to be processed through other people's opinions. Not every step needs to be validated or applauded. Some things need to breathe in silence. Some growth happens underground, away from attention, criticism, and even praise. Focus, especially in today's digital age, is already under attack. Your attention is pulled in 100 directions: notifications, conversations, messages, comparisons, and expectations. If you don't intentionally create space for your mind to think, to reflect, and to be free of outside influence, then you're always performing, always reacting. And performance is the enemy of deep focus. When you're constantly aware of who's watching or what others will think, you begin to filter your thoughts. You start shaping your actions for optics rather than authenticity. You dilute your creativity because you're afraid of being misunderstood. This mental friction builds up over time, and before you know it, you're not thinking for yourself anymore. You're thinking to fit in. You're thinking to please. You're thinking to be safe in other people's eyes, but not in your own mind. On the other hand, when you cultivate privacy, you create an inner sanctuary. You free yourself from the burden of overexposure. You give your brain the chance to concentrate deeply, to enter flow states, and to work through problems without noise. This is when your best ideas are born. This is when you begin to understand yourself. The mind that is not constantly on display is the mind that can truly focus. The mind that is protected from judgment is the mind that dares to be creative. And the mind that is free from external pressure is the mind that can go deep. There is also emotional safety in privacy. Sharing too much too soon, especially when you're emotionally vulnerable, can lead to shame, regret, or confusion. Not everyone deserves access to your journey. Not everyone will understand your perspective, and not everyone should. When you learn to process your thoughts internally first, you become emotionally independent. You learn to self-soothe, to reflect, and to gain wisdom from within before turning to the world. That doesn't mean you isolate yourself or suppress your emotions. It means you give yourself the space to understand them before placing them in someone else's hands. We often seek connection by oversharing, hoping that someone will understand, support, or validate us. But true connection starts with self-understanding, and that requires solitude. When you understand your own needs, your own values, your own direction, you no longer need to broadcast every part of your life. You don't need the world's approval because you already know who you are. Privacy becomes your filter. It helps you decide what matters. It protects your energy. It helps you separate what's real from what's reactive. This also applies to goals and ambitions. When you speak too early about your dreams, you invite external narratives that may not align with your vision. People project their fears, their doubts, and their limitations onto you. And if you're not grounded, those projections can distort your path. You start adjusting your goals based on someone else's insecurities. You lose the purity of your original intention. Privacy gives you time to refine your vision before it's challenged. It gives you time to build momentum before resistance hits. And it allows you to take ownership of your journey without distractions or detours. In silence, your thoughts echo. You hear the truth more clearly. You learn what you really believe, not what you were told to believe. You discover what you really want, not what you're expected to want. That kind of clarity can only come when you're not constantly explaining yourself. When you stop narrating your life in real time, you start living it. You start making decisions not for appearance, but for alignment. So, don't be afraid to keep things to yourself. Don't be afraid to go invisible while you build. Don't be afraid to grow in private. The greatest transformations often happen quietly. The most powerful people are not always the loudest. They are the ones who master their inner world. They are the ones who respect their own mental space. They are the ones who move in silence, not because they're hiding, but because they're focused, intentional, and unshaken. When you protect your privacy, you protect your peace, you protect your process, and you protect the most important resource of all, your mind. Let the world see the results, but keep the process sacred. Strong boundaries lead to strong minds. Not everything is meant to be shared. Some things grow best in silence. Boundaries are not walls that keep others out. They are the quiet systems that keep your mind, energy, and values protected. In a world where oversharing is often confused with authenticity, people are slowly losing touch with the quiet strength that comes from restraint. Every time you share something personal, intimate, or in progress with the world, you open up a part of yourself to energy you can't control. Whether it's opinions, assumptions, praise, or criticism, you now carry weight that may not belong to you. And that weight can dilute your clarity, drain your focus, and compromise your mental strength. The strongest minds in the world do not speak every time they think. They do not react every time they feel. They know that energy is finite and focus is fragile. They understand that not every moment is for public consumption and not every thought deserves a response. These individuals live by boundaries, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. They protect their time, their emotions, their ambitions, and even their pain. They don't seek permission to grow, nor do they seek attention to validate that growth. They are disciplined with what they share because they understand that the more people know, the more they can influence. And influence, when misdirected, can be destructive. When you lack boundaries, you become vulnerable to emotional noise. You start to feel the need to explain everything, your choices, your journey, your silence. You begin to feel guilty for keeping things to yourself, as if you owe the world your thoughts and your process. But the truth is you don't owe anyone your inner world. You are allowed to have private goals. You are allowed to struggle in silence. You are allowed to build something meaningful without announcing every step. That's not hiding. That's protecting. That's nurturing something until it's ready to stand on its own. Growth is often misunderstood because it's not always visible. It happens in the background. It happens in moments of discipline, of failure, of emotional wrestling that no one sees. And it thrives best when left undisturbed. Imagine a seed underground. If you keep digging it up to show it to others, it will never take root. It needs darkness. It needs silence. It needs protection. Your ideas, your goals, your personal healing, they are no different. They require boundaries to grow. They require a safe, controlled space away from noise, judgment, and distractions. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to know that premature exposure can kill potential. Strong boundaries also protect your energy. Not everyone deserves access to your thoughts. Not everyone earns the right to speak into your process. When you keep your circle tight, when you speak less and do more, you create a filter that blocks out unnecessary opinions and distractions. You stop explaining yourself to people who aren't invested in your growth. You stop defending your goals to those who don't share your vision. You become more focused, more efficient, more at peace. Boundaries give you room to breathe and space to think. There is another dimension to this that often goes unnoticed. Boundaries build emotional resilience. When you choose not to overshare, you learn to carry your own emotions. You learn to regulate your thoughts without broadcasting them. You become mentally stronger because you're not outsourcing your emotional labor to others. You don't need constant reassurance because you've learned to reassure yourself. You don't need constant feedback because you've learned to trust your process. That kind of strength is rare, but it's also earned. It's built through restraint, through patience, through the daily decision to protect your mind before you expose it to the world. Of course, there is a difference between isolation and boundaries. Isolation disconnects, boundaries define. Boundaries are not about shutting the world out entirely. They are about choosing who and what enters your space. You can still connect deeply with people. You can still be authentic and open. But you do so with intention, not impulse. You share from a place of strength, not from a place of emotional dependence. You choose moments that are safe and people who are trustworthy. This discipline creates freedom. The freedom to think clearly. The freedom to act boldly. The freedom to move forward without constantly looking sideways. It creates a mental environment where your thoughts are your own, where your purpose is not diluted by outside voices, and where your energy flows toward action, not validation. That's the kind of mindset that builds legacies. That's the kind of mental space where greatness grows. In the silence, you begin to hear your real voice. In solitude, your ideas become sharper. In privacy, your intentions become purer. You're with strong boundaries. You begin to build a life that is rooted in your truth, not in other people's expectations. Not everything you feel needs to be said. Not everything you do needs to be seen. Not everything you dream needs to be announced. Some things are sacred. Some things are meant to be protected. Because when you give something the time and space to grow on its own, it often becomes stronger, deeper, and more meaningful than you ever imagined. So hold your vision close. Respect your silence. Build your boundaries, not as walls of defense, but as gates of focus. Learn to say no to things that pull you away from your peace. Learn to speak only when it serves your purpose. Learn to protect the parts of you that the world may not understand yet. Because the strongest minds are not the loudest ones. They are the ones who know the value of privacy, the strength of restraint, and the quiet power of discipline.